Right now, someone you went to school with is getting married, someone you barely know just bought a house, and someone who used to sit next to you at work is living in a city you've never been to, looking happier than you've ever seen them. You know this because you checked. You didn't plan to, you just did, and here's the strange part. You don't even like some of these people, so why can't you stop watching them? The answer isn't jealousy, it isn't loneliness, it isn't some weakness you need to fix. The answer is buried inside a piece of your brain that hasn't changed in over 100,000 years. And once you understand what it actually is, the way you see every scroll, every comparison, every moment of quiet fixation on someone else's life will never look the same again. Your brain is a social calculator. It has been since long before language, long before cities, long before the concept of a career or a wedding or a vacation photo. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar at the University of Oxford spent decades studying primate behavior and came to a striking conclusion. He found that the size of the neocortex, the outer layer of the brain responsible for complex thought, correlates directly with the size of the social group that species lives in. Bigger group, bigger brain, humans, it turns out, evolved their enormous brains largely to keep track of each other. Dunbar estimated that the average human can meaningfully track around 150 social relationships at once. Not just names, not just faces, but status, reputation. Who is allied with who has resources, who is rising, who is fallen, who is a threat, who is a potential partner. This is Dunbar's number, and it became one of the most studied ideas in modern anthropology. Your brain didn't evolve to do math or write poetry or design buildings. It evolved first and foremost to model the people around you. Because for your ancestors, other people were everything. Think about what life looked like 60,000 years ago. You're in a group of roughly 150 people. There is no government, no police, no backup. If you're cast out, you die. If you make the wrong alliance, you lose resources. If you misjudge a rival's intentions, the consequences are immediate and physical. Tracking social information wasn't a hobby. It wasn't something you did when you were bored. It was the primary survival skill your species had. Watching other people wasn't optional. It was the thing that kept you alive. And now you have a phone. Psychologist Nicola Rahani at University College London studies the evolutionary roots of human social behavior. Her research shows that social comparison isn't a side effect of modern culture. It is one of the oldest cognitive tools humans possess. You compare yourself to others because comparison tells you where you stand, and where you stand determines what you do next. Move closer, back off, compete, cooperate. The brain doesn't compare because it's insecure, it compares because comparison is data. But here's the part nobody tells you. The system was built for a world where the 150 people you tracked were real. You saw them every day, you shared food with them, you knew their children and their parents and their habits and their moods. The comparisons you made were accurate because the information you had was accurate. You saw the whole picture. Now that system is running on something completely different. You open a feed and you're suddenly tracking thousands of people, not 150,000s. And the information you're getting isn't accurate. It isn't even close to accurate. It's a single carefully selected image of a moment, a highlight, a performance. Your brain doesn't know this. Your brain was not built to know this. It receives the information and immediately begins processing it the same way it processed a rival clanmate's new hunting spear 60,000 years ago. Someone has more. Someone is doing better. What does that mean for you? This is what researchers at the University of Michigan, led by psychologist Ethan Cross, found when they studied social media use over time. Participants who passively scrolled through social feeds reported lower mood, lower life satisfaction, and a reduced sense of connection, not because they were weak, not because they had low self-esteem, but because the ancient comparison system was receiving inputs it was never designed to process and drawing conclusions it had no way to correct. You feel worse because your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do. It just doesn't have access to the full picture. And so you scroll again because the system is looking for resolution. It wants to complete its social map. It wants to know where you stand, but the feed never ends. The picture never completes, and so the loop continues. Scroll, compare, feel something, scroll again. Now here's the counterintuitive part. The fact that you can't stop thinking about other people's lives is not evidence that you're shallow or broken or too online. It is evidence that you're a deeply, profoundly human. You're running one of the most sophisticated social intelligence systems ever evolved on this planet. The problem isn't the system. The problem is the environment. Think about what comparison actually gave your ancestors. It wasn't just anxiety. It wasn't just pressure. It was information. You noticed that the hunter in your group had a new technique and you adapted. You noticed that the families who stored food before winter survived and you prepared. Social watching was a learning mechanism. It was how culture spread, how skills transferred, how entire groups survived long enough to pass anything down at all. You are descended from the people who watched. The ones who looked away didn't make it. That pull you feel when you see someone doing something you want, something you don't have yet, is not envy in the petty sense. It is a signal, a very old signal. It is your brain saying, pay attention, this matters. There is something here worth understanding, but the modern environment has jammed the signal because the feed gives you that pull constantly, endlessly, with no release, no resolution, no truth. The hunger fires again and again and never gets fed because what you're seeing isn't real enough to feed it. It's the image of a meal, and your brain keeps reaching for the plate. Psychologist Leon Festinger, who in 1954 developed social comparison theory, argued that humans have a fundamental drive to evaluate their own opinions and abilities by comparing themselves to others. This was not a new behavior he was describing. He was naming something as old as the species itself. But Festinger also found something else. The comparisons people make are directional. You compare yourself to people who are slightly above you, not wildly out of reach. Because the goal of comparison was never to feel bad. The goal was to identify the next achievable step. In a small, accurate social group that works beautifully, you compare yourself to someone one rung above you, you see a realistic path, and you move. In an algorithmic feed optimized to show you the most aspirational content possible, you compare yourself to people who are not one rung above you, they are 1,000 rungs above. They are the best version of something you barely recognize, and the path becomes impossible to see. So the signal misfires, the hunger has nowhere to go, and you sit with a feeling that your brain interprets as falling behind, even when your life is, by any reasonable measure, completely fine. Here is something worth sitting with. The average person spends over 2 hours a day on social media. That is over 30 days a year. 30 full days of your brain running its ancient comparison machinery against a stream of inputs that were engineered by entire teams of behavioral scientists to keep you watching. You're not weak for struggling with this. You're a 100,000-year-old social animal up against one of the most sophisticated attention systems ever built. And those systems know exactly what they're doing. They did not stumble onto the comparison loop by accident. The companies that built the feed understand your social brain better than most researchers who study it. They discovered early on that nothing keeps a human watching like other humans, like status, like the unresolved question of where you stand. Your oldest survival mechanism became the engine of their business model, and it works because it was always going to work. But knowing this changes something, because when you feel that tightening in your chest looking at someone else's announcement, or someone else's trip, or someone else's version of a life you thought you wanted, you can now name what is actually happening. That is not proof that your life is wrong. That is a 100,000-year-old system running a diagnostic. It is looking for information. It is trying to orient you. It wants to know where you stand so it can figure out what to do next. You can give it better information. What does that look like? It looks like the 150 people who knew you before you performed anything for them. The ones who saw you on the bad days, who had context, who carried the full picture of who you actually are, not the image of who you're trying to become. The ones whose opinion of you meant something because it was grounded in reality. That is what your brain was built to process, not the highlight reel, the actual real. Nicola Raihani, in her work on human cooperation, describes something she calls the social attention economy, the idea that in every group, attention is a currency. People watch who is watched. They value who is valued. They follow the gaze of others to understand what matters. For hundreds of thousands of years, that gaze was anchored in physical reality. You could only watch the people in front of you. The gaze was grounded. Now the gaze is infinite and unmoored, and it costs you something every time you follow it somewhere it was never meant to go. Robin Dunbar, after decades of studying what holds human groups together, said something quietly devastating. He said that in the modern world, people have never been more connected, and they have rarely felt more alone, because connection was never about volume, it was never about reach, it was about being truly known inside a small, real, irreplaceable circle, about showing up in a space where the information was accurate, where the comparison wasn't performance, where you could see the whole picture, and so could they. That is what your brain has been searching for every time you open the app. Not the feed, not the followers, not the highlight. It has been searching for the feeling of being accurately known by people who are actually there. Tonight, when you open your phone, your brain will scan the faces the way it has always scanned faces. It will look for threats and allies and lessons and rivals. It will do its ancient work. It cannot help it, neither can you, but now you know what it's doing. And that means for the first time, you can decide what information you actually hand it, because the pull you feel looking at someone else's life, that is not weakness. That is the oldest hunger in the human species. The hunger to know where you stand, the hunger to belong to something real. The only question now is whether you feed it with something that actually satisfies it. Right now, somewhere out there, someone you barely know is living a life that looks better than yours. You know this because you checked. You always check. And now you know exactly why.